Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week's show includes a couple big sequels, Captain America: The Winter Soldier and Rio 2. Our triple feature of older movies is new classic Cabin in the Woods, old classic Seven, chosen by Justin, and our Oscar A to Z nominee, All About Eve, one of the most celebrated movies ever at the Oscars. Our top 5 this week, inspired by Seven, is our favorite serial killer portrayals. Before we get started, though, in the news this week it was announced that Warner Brothers and Harry Potter scribe J.K. Rowling are developing a trilogy of new films based on a Hogwarts textbook called Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. The movies will take place in the same world as Harry Potter, but about 70 years before the original films in the series, and Rowling plans to write the screenplays herself. Now, Joe, you're new to this news, so let me get your fresh take on this.
Well, I know that Rowling has a pretty good imagination, and I actually really did like her books. I think she's actually a pretty good writer, and for the most part, I thought the films turned out pretty well. I will admit it sounds like there's very limited information, so it is kind of vague, but I do remember the book being cited, and there were some really cool things. And if this does expand on a world, which is one thing that the fans have really been wanting, I mean, there's a lot more to talk about, and what a lot of people have actually mentioned is they'd like to actually see the world, see the past, maybe some of the characters like Dumbledore or something, learn a little bit more about them. And I think if there's potential for good storytelling here, especially now that I know she's actually writing the screenplay, there's potential for good. I mean, whether or not it'll be great, I don't know, but I'm definitely interested.
I think that's what kind of clinched it for me, is that she's actually authoring them.
Because one of the cool things about the movies is I believe she did have a pretty good hand in the casting and a lot of the decisions that were made. So she really cares about her book and her fans, and from what I know about her, she's a pretty honest person. So
yeah.
I like that about her.
And, I mean, it certainly is no sort of cash grab from her. She's one of the richest British women alive.
She's one of the richest authors ever, and I mean, you have to admit, she's doing it purely for fun because she does not need the money.
Right. So, and that I think is a positive as well, because that means she's going to hopefully take her time and craft something that people want to see.
From somebody who read the books as a kid and waiting years for each book, she takes her time.
Yeah. Justin, what do you think?
I'm kind of on the fence on this one, gentlemen. I agree with Joe. J.K. Rowling is a pretty good writer, not one of my favorites. For Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, I remember reading it as a kid. I can't say it was fantastic, but I mean, I could see it possibly lending itself to an interesting movie, seeing Harry Potter people. I mean, my issue with it is just Harry Potter wrapped up. The general stuff has mostly been resolved. There really is no need to revisit Harry Potter. However, what does make me kind of hopeful for the movie is Harry Potter was really good when it was just sort of standalone stories. And when it got much more continuity focused, like with books 4 through 7 and obviously with the movies as well, I mean, I could see potential, but right now, what's really the point? I mean, I don't know anyone who said, let's make a Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find the movie, or Quidditch Through the Ages movie, or any other book that they may have mentioned in this series.
Well, there might not be any specific book that's cited, but I have heard plenty of people say they would like more, and they would like pretty much anything at this point.
Well, and the Harry Potter world that's down in Florida is a huge attraction. I mean, people love that.
It is, but if that were the case, I mean, why not just make a big thing there instead of turning into a trilogy of movies? I mean,
what do you mean?
Make a world based on Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them in the magical world of Harry Potter in Universal Studios.
Yeah, but if it's not a movie or anything, like, people aren't going to know what's happening.
You already have a world devoted solely to Harry Potter. It would work.
I don't agree with that. And also, not everybody can get to Florida. There's tons of Harry Potter fans around the world that I think would love to see origins of certain characters, or different mystical beasts.
I don't think you're going to see the origins of various characters.
I think you might.
Justin, it's kind of like you said. I agree with you. I think Harry Potter did work at its best when it was more standalone stories. But I think there's plenty of standalone stories you could have following different characters in that world. I mean, there's a lot of potential. Even if it was somebody completely new, we could still learn a lot and have a lot of fun with it.
Which I agree, but I mean, you said it wasn't a cash grab. I think it's a complete cash grab. I mean, yes.
Maybe for the studio.
Which I think is the main motivation. Obviously, yes.
Well, of course it is, but she wouldn't have agreed to it unless it was something she believed in. She certainly doesn't need the money.
She really doesn't.
And I agree with you on that. It's just, I don't think there's any other way to call this anything but a cash grab. Obviously, the series is concluded. The general storyline doesn't need to go any further. I've heard many people say, let's follow Harry's kids, which I think is a horrible idea.
Well, Dan, what do you think about it?
Personally, I think it's fine. I mean, I have seen all the Harry Potter movies within about a year's time.
Wow.
Because I sort of missed the boat a little bit on that. And, you know, when it wrapped up, I was satisfied with the conclusion, but at the same time, it's a cool world. I mean, it to me, it's no different than the Hobbit movies. I mean, Lord of the Rings was a thing, and it wrapped up. But guess what? There's a huge world to be explored.
They could do that forever.
You know? And, I mean, you could certainly say the same thing. We're going to be talking about Captain America in a little bit. You could certainly say the same thing with the Marvel Avengers type
Thousands of comics.
There's so much to explore. You know, I think why not at least give it a go? J.K. Rowling is certainly a good author. I would much rather have her do it than just tell Warner Brothers, okay, yeah, you can do whatever you want with it. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are her babies. I don't think she's going to let anything terrible happen with the execution of it.
I'm sort of in the same vein as the Batman vs. Superman movie. Let's just wait and see and hope that whatever comes out is actually a decent movie.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, we're a couple years away from it, so it's,
that too.
A seed of an idea right now, but it seems like it will definitely be happening down the line. All right, well, let's move into our new releases, and first up we have the record breaker for biggest April opening ever, and that is Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and Joe's going to tell us about that.
All right, Captain America 2, the Winter Soldier. A superhero film starring Chris Evans, Samuel L. Jackson, Scarlett Johansson, Robert Redford, and Anthony Mackie. Dan's favorite.
I do like Anthony Mackie.
Taking place after the Avengers, Cap is struggling to adapt to his new life in the future, feeling somewhat lost. Working with his buddy Black Widow on anti-terrorist missions, our hero learns of a new threat to the world, including a dangerous new enemy, an assassin simply known as the Winter Soldier, who may have a connection to Steve Rogers' past. It's an action movie first and a thriller second, with some of that fun humor we've come to love from Marvel Studios, and plenty of callbacks and references that only comic book readers would get. Chris Evans shines as usual as Steve Rogers, and his chemistry with all the other actors is really good as well. Though with such a great cast as this, it's not really a surprise.
Yeah.
The biggest surprise for me actually was Anthony Mackie as the Falcon. Not anything against him specifically, but I give credit to the filmmakers for actually managing to make one of the lamest characters in comics actually kind of cool. The plot is epic, action is great, and the characters are very well written. I do have a few gripes. The plot is a bit muddled at points, and there are some pacing issues, and including the big reveal, which honestly seems a bit unlikely for the villains to pull off, and kind of makes S.H.I.E.L.D. seem somewhat incompetent in retrospect, but you suspend your disbelief. There have been dumb things in comics that you had to accept, so I'll let it slide. Also, the traitor is obvious from his first scene. I'm sorry, he'll step in and you'll know. Still, it's lots of fun, and it delivered a pretty darn good story. The best thing ever? Not really, but it's easily the best Marvel movie we've had in a while, and I give it a B+.
All right. Justin, what do you think of The Winter Soldier?
After two decidedly underwhelming installments for what has been referred to as Phase 2 of the Marvel Universe, Captain America the Winter Soldier gives hope that the franchise still has some potential for good, fun blockbusters. While I am not certain whether or not directors Anthony and Joe Russo made good on their claims to make a superhero film like a 70s political thriller, it definitely has more suspense than the past couple films, particularly with the concept of the ever-elusive S.H.I.E.L.D. organization coming undone. Unfortunately, this falters somewhat with goofy dialogue, and the Winter Soldier himself ultimately playing second fiddle to Redford. This is not necessarily bad, but for his character to be mentioned in the title, one would figure more time would be devoted to him. However, where Captain America the Winter Soldier truly shines is the use of the supporting cast. Until this point, Johansson as Black Widow seemed like a pointless addition to the franchise, as well as Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, but in this installment, both really helped the film along, and if a spin-off were devoted to either of their characters, it now seems like a more than opportune time. Although the Avengers still remains the top of the heap in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's still quite a bit to like about Captain America the Winter Soldier, and I give it a B+ as well.
Well, of all the movies in the Avengers universe, I thought the original Captain America, the first Avenger, was the worst. Some people agree with me on that. Joe, I know, strongly disagrees with it. But what most people can agree on is that Marvel has put together a pretty lackluster Phase 2, as Justin mentioned, with Iron Man 3 and Thor the Dark World, both underwhelming. I was really hoping that the Winter Soldier would pull the entire series back up where it belongs. Now, I like the character of Captain America and his interplay with the rest of the Avengers in their collective film, but the first Captain America I thought was boring, overly long, and not engaging. Luckily, this film more than delivers, and I very much agree with Joe, it's the best Marvel movie that we've seen in a long time. It does have a little bit of a slow start, but around the 20-minute mark where Nick Fury really gets integrated into the story, it becomes supremely interesting. Captain America is clearly at his best when he's teamed up with other members of S.H.I.E.L.D. like Fury and Black Widow, as he is here, and couldn't agree more with Justin that the Black Widow up until this point really seemed kind of pointless. I don't agree that Nick Fury did. I thought he really is kind of the glue that holds everybody together, but Black Widow I can definitely see that with, and maybe that was also what I was missing from the first Cap movie, that interplay with somebody else. There's more gunplay in The Winter Soldier than I like to see in a superhero movie, and that detracts a bit from the enjoyment, but through and through this is a very good comic book movie and a welcome entry to a previously disappointing Phase 2, and I give it an A-.
Ooh, how about that?
And what you said about sort of knowing the enemy right from the start, I don't have a problem with that because it is a comic movie. I mean, you know when you see the Joker enter.
The thing is, I feel like that was supposed to be a bit of a twist. And to have a little more impact, like, oh no, how could he be the bad guy? He's such a guy we like. And I knew from the first scene.
Yeah, I definitely didn't see it as a twist.
Well, I thought it was supposed to be.
Okay.
Maybe
that's possible.
Maybe you're right, and it wasn't supposed to be. But I didn't think that was a problem. I just said I thought it was pretty obvious.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't know if it's a bad thing necessarily.
Right.
I thought the villain worked. But the one reason why it didn't, I was originally considering an A-, but the reason it didn't quite make that cut for me is because the Winter Soldier is literally advertised as being the main focus of the movie, the crux of the film, and Cap's development. He's kind of just a hook and more of a side thing.
Right.
And he was really underutilized. And I know that they are kind of building towards something else, but I thought that was a little misleading in the title. And I know that because of the events in the film, it's not really the Winter Soldier that's the big reveal. It's something else.
Right.
But they couldn't call it that, otherwise it would give away the plot. So yeah. I can understand the problem with that. Plus, to be honest, I mean, everybody that has read the comics knows who the Winter Soldier is, and even a lot of people that don't. Before this movie came out, I went online, and a lot of people were asking, who's the Winter Soldier? And people did the history of the Winter Soldier. So a lot of people probably had this spoiled anyway. Mm-hmm. Maybe they figured that going in. I mean, he's one of the biggest things in comics for Cap recently. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you. Could have been handled a little bit better, but I think they kind of knew that 90% of the people knew.
Maybe I'm stupid. I didn't know the Winter Soldier was the enemy or a person until I saw the movie. Because the first one is called Captain America, the First Avenger, mm-hmm. referring to Captain America. Mm-hmm. Second one's called Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Mm-hmm. I thought it was another identity. I thought it was another code name for Captain America.
No.
So maybe I'm the idiot.
No, I can kind of understand that. But when they talk about the Winter Soldier, did you know?
Oh yeah, I mean, once I was watching the movie, I knew.
But did you know who it was going to be? I'm just trying to look at somebody who doesn't know much about the comics.
Not really. I wouldn't say it was obvious.
Well, when the twist was revealed, mm-hmm. how much of an impact did it really have on you?
I thought it was all right. I mean, I wasn't, blown away by it.
Because I felt like the movie could have been, I think it could have really bordered on excellent territory if it just had a little more dramatic punch.
There's a lot of foreshadowing.
There's a lot. You can kind of tell this whole thing is based on his past, and you know that it's kind of coming back.
Right.
Oh, there was a good scene where he actually goes and talks to the lady that he originally kind of was in love with. Mm-hmm. Back then, she's still alive.
Yeah. That was pretty cool.
And she has Alzheimer's, so she doesn't remember anything. And I thought that was a really good dramatic scene, but it's only really brought up once. And it's kind of an example of things like there's some dramatic weight, but there could have been just a little bit more at points. But overall, I thought it was really good. I could see it getting bumped up to an A-, but I'm just kind of on the edge.
Okay.
I thought the Winter Soldier was just a little underutilized. I didn't like the fact that was the title.
I did like Anthony Mackie as the Falcon. You're right on that. I don't know that the character normally stinks in the comics.
He does. He's not he's not a bad character per se, but he's a joke.
Okay.
If you know what I mean. He's like...
Well, they certainly did not make him a joke in this.
No, he was no joke.
No, he was no joke. All right, up next we have our other big sequel, and that is Rio 2. In this sequel to the 2011 animated hit film, Jesse Eisenberg and Anne Hathaway reprise their roles as Blue Macaw's Blue and Jewel. They take their kids and a few friends to the Amazon to find their owners Linda and Tulio, voiced by Leslie Mann and Rodrigo Santoro, who, while on an expedition, believe they might have found other blue macaws. The birds find an entire flock of macaws, including Jewel's father, voiced by Andy Garcia, and her childhood friend and bird hottie, Roberto, played by Bruno Mars. There are also two sets of villains in the film. Jermaine Clement returns as Nigel, a cockatoo out to get Blue and his family, and there are also some loggers going after Linda and Tulio and the forest as a whole. If it all seems like there's a lot going on, there is. The first Rio was an alright film, but at least it was fairly contained. The extra characters and pretty much 3 different main plots in this one make it sort of a mess. It has its funny moments, largely with Clement and Kristen Chenoweth as his sidekick Gabby, a poison frog, and also a host of jungle characters auditioning for a talent show was a great scene. The cinematography is also great, but there's a little too much going on, and much of the main storyline with Blue adjusting to life in the jungle and trying to please Jewel's father just falls flat. I leave Rio 2 with a C+. Justin?
Similar to the Ice Age sequels, Rio 2 means to expand the universe of the original film, but ultimately ends up contradicting it. It means well, and there's some fun to be had, but it still sticks out as the narrative progresses. Fortunately, in a positive contrast to the original, the song numbers this time around are actually decent, largely thanks to, as Dan mentioned, new addition Kristen Chenoweth, who easily gets some of the movie's best scenes.
She has that solo song she does is a highlight for sure.
Absolutely. That doesn't excuse Jamie Foxx and will.i.am as Rio's most useless characters, but at least this time around they are a little less annoying. Overall, like the original, Rio 2 is a series of wild craziness with some enticing spirit that will probably please fans of the original, but it's just not up to the standard that the original had, and I give it a C+.
What'd you give the original?
B-.
Okay, I gave it a B. It's you know, it's not that much worse, but there's definitely some improvements that could be had. Yeah, poor Jamie Foxx and will.i.am, their characters are terrible, and I'm glad Tracy Morgan was barely in this one too. He's not very fun. Joe, what'd you think?
Not really. Pretty much echo you guys, really. I actually never saw the first one, so I was going in kind of blind. Didn't really know these characters, but I thought I knew them pretty well. I got behind Blue. I believe that's Jesse Eisenberg, right? You know, I thought he did a pretty good job. I mean, a likable character, and I thought that we got a good job knowing his family and identifying with them, but I felt like they could have been a little more expanded upon. I think that has something to do with the fact that the plot is kind of all over the place.
Yeah, there's just so much going on.
The main story with Blue and dealing with kind of the separation with his wife and kind of finding her family again, I thought that was decent, but it kind of felt like a retread of, like trying to impress the father.
Yeah.
And, not quite going anywhere with it. But I didn't think the dad was really that hard on him, though. Like, I know that
not really.
The father...
Not particularly.
It kind of made me think of Meet the Parents. We have Robert De Niro giving Ben Stiller a hard time, and it's really just a lot of difficulty, and you see that a lot in similar plots. But really, I mean, her dad was actually pretty nice. I mean, he was strict, but I mean, he hugged him right off the bat. He wasn't that bad of a guy. Like, Blue kind of does mess up in the movie.
A lot.
So it's kind of understandable why he has some issues. But other than that, I thought that the side plots... The one with the loggers, I thought was almost unnecessary.
Me too.
Same.
I thought that one really stuck out. But my favorite part of the movie actually was Nigel. I thought he was a great bad guy, and I agree that his sidekicks were good and music numbers were good. He was easily the best part of the movie. He had the most entertaining scenes, and I actually feel like if they had a spin-off completely based around him, I'd be fine with it.
He's such a great character.
I really liked that character. He was good. And what else did I like? I also liked a lot of the little funny moments, like the turtles and the mosquito chorus. There were a lot of different scenes that really did make me laugh. And overall, I have to say that it felt entertaining and there was a lot of wackiness. It really did have me invested in the story, and I enjoyed a lot of the comedy. Also liked the music, and I thought it was very colorful. I agree with the cinematography, the animation. It was better than I was expecting it to be. Overall, though, I thought it was a pretty good experience, and I also give it a C+.
Okay.
I thought there really was an overabundance of side characters.
Yeah.
Like, I felt that also the toucan was pretty much useless, too.
Yeah, George Lopez.
George Lopez. That was
Yep.
George Lopez? I didn't even notice.
Yep.
Like, I honestly felt like none of the side characters were necessary. Really.
Most of them weren't.
I just felt like, that's usually a bad sign in a kid's movie when you have, like, it's kind of the way Disney did it back in the 90s. They had that formula. Everybody had, like, one side character. And you could kind of tell the lack of confidence in the story with the main characters when they were constantly adding new ones, which is one reason why, an example, Pocahontas. Pocahontas had side characters, but even the side characters had sidekicks. So, I mean, this felt like that. Like, you had, was it Jamie Foxx who was a side character and Will.i.am was his sidekick?
Yes, exactly.
It felt like, why do we have...
and to bring up Ice Age again, Ice Age 4 had the exact same problem.
Is that the one that had like a slew of characters?
Yes.
Because I saw a bit of that.
Yes, I mean, Ice Age on the whole already has too many characters. And then the fourth one was just like, John Leguizamo's mother was in it, and then the characters they introduced all had like either girlfriends or side people. It was just like...
Too many celebrities.
It was way too much.
That was what I was really dreading with the fact that they were like hyping up that Bruno Mars was in it. But fortunately,
I thought he was alright.
Yeah, actually, him I didn't mind at all.
He was funny.
Yeah, he was good. But yeah, Nigel is the best character probably in the whole series.
Who voices him?
Jermaine Clement. If you don't really know who that is, he's part of Flight of the Conchords. But also, most recently, he was in Muppets Most Wanted as the third member of the prison trio. Danny Trejo, Ray Liotta, and he was the third one.
Okay.
So, just kind of put a face on him.
Wow, great voice.
Yeah, good voice talents. Well, up next is Oculus, and Joe's going to tell us about that.
Oculus, a.k.a. The Evil Mirror. An American horror film directed by Mike Flanagan and starring Karen Gillan of Doctor Who, Katie Sackhoff of the Battlestar Galactica remake, and Rory Cochrane of CSI Miami and other things.
I didn't know any of these people, by the way. I don't watch any of their shows.
Okay, this is the reason why I was excited about Oculus, or at least interested in doing the main review, is because it has a lot of people I like.
Makes sense.
I mean, Karen Gillan, she plays Amy, who was the 11th Doctor's main companion, who was an annoying character, but good actress. I liked her. Anyway, that's the main reason I liked it, because I liked some of the cast members. Now, getting into the synopsis, this tale follows a brother and sister, Tim and Kaylee. Over a decade earlier, Tim was sent to a mental institution after apparently shooting and fatally murdering his father. However, the siblings made a pact to reunite eventually, since this was actually the result of their parents being possessed by an antique mirror. After some investigation, Kaylee, played by Gillian, learns that the previous residents of the house have suffered the same fate. Tim and Kaylee face their fears and return to the house in an attempt to fight the evil force, all while quite literally reliving past events through a lot of hallucinations and illusions that seems to be produced by the mirror and its evil inhabitants. It's sort of unclear. Oculus is a very surprising horror film, as it implements a style of storytelling that is riveting and somewhat difficult to pull off, as it is telling two stories side by side, working backwards and forwards, all while trying to add some rather strange, surreal elements. This does add to genuine creepiness and makes you think long enough to try and stay invested. The problem is that this technique is so overdone that the audience may not have time to breathe. In addition, some basic logic kind of goes out the window, as it often does in these types of films, in regard to character decisions, and it does fall prey to some pretty hokey pseudo-scares. Still, the cast was decent, the tone creepy, and the story was unique and interesting enough to kind of sort of break the streak of bad horror for the year. And I give it a C+.
Oculus could have been so good.
Could have been.
Its basic story about the haunted mirror is good, even though it's been done before. But the origin of the mirror and how it affects the two siblings, both in the past and present day, is very good. I agree that the acting in this is pretty good. I mean, compared to certain other horror films.
It actually surprised me. It's a good cast, honestly.
Yeah.
And I thought Rory Cochrane, that's the guy that played the dad.
Mm-hmm.
The scene that involves his death, I thought was actually kind of sad. I really did.
I was happy to see him go.
I don't know. I thought it was kind of sad.
To be honest.
I mean, he was possessed by an evil demon, so it wasn't all him.
Was.
Give him a break.
That's true. But the flashbacks get confusing when they come too fast and furiously by the end. But really, there are two glaring issues I had with Oculus. The main one is that it's not that scary, really at all. It gave me chills a few times, but I wasn't ever actually scared. There's a lot of mind twisting that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, but that again, not really scary, just sort of
Creepy.
a little bit creepy. The secondary problem is that to try and add scares to it, it becomes partially a ghost story, and that feels completely out of place. There doesn't need to be any ghosts in it. The mirror is the main point. That its victims come back to life just seemed very forced. Oculus in its original state was a 30-minute short, and it probably should have stayed that way because there's just way too much padding in this film, and I give it a C. Justin?
Oculus has the unfortunate problem of having an interesting horror subject antagonist with the main issue of most contemporary films in the genre. It's unbeatable. It doesn't help that the central narrative is interspersed with needless 20 minutes of flashbacks of their dark childhood past. Not only is this confusing, but it ruins the ambiguity that usually serves for some of the film's more promising moments. I know you mentioned with the ghost thing, I really liked the way the mirror was originally working with the mind games. Not necessarily creepy, but very, very interesting. Mm-hmm. And when they started adding these further, more complicated supernatural elements, it just went way out of proportion.
Yeah, and they didn't even need to be there, right?
Couldn't agree more.
Ghosts were a little tacked on.
Oculus had quite a bit of potential, but unfortunately, it's just a missed opportunity, and I give it a C.
Not that bad.
No, not that bad at all. Boy, we're all in agreement on pretty much all these movies so far. I really wanted it to be good. The previews looked really scary. I thought, okay, cool mirror thing going on, but then, the further it went, it even started out. I was okay with the original flashbacks, and I was on board.
It was tricky. I mean, I liked the style, but I do feel like they could have interspersed it a little bit more.
Yeah,
because it was literally flashbacks were in the same scenes with what was currently happening, and sometimes there were side things that weren't real. So
and I think that's what they were going for. I think they were going for staying with the whole mind game,
which is
theme.
Cool, but it kind of got a little
way confusing.
I had a hard time keeping track towards the end of what time period we were actually in.
Right. All right. Well, let's move on then to Cesar Chavez, and I saw this one, so I will give the sole review, and perhaps we'll hear from you guys when it comes out on DVD. Mm-hmm. But Michael Pena plays the late civil rights and fair labor activist in this biopic, directed by actor Diego Luna, who we most recently saw in Elysium. Pena plays the role well, and the film gives a great, seemingly accurate portrayal of Chavez's labor issues and public struggles. What it leaves out, though, is much about his private life. We see his pacifist nature and his 25 days of fasting, which somehow takes almost no physical toll, except for Pena looking tired, but it says very little about his strained relationship with his son and other personal details. America Ferrera as Chavez's wife Helen gives one of the best performances of the film, but Rosario Dawson has an awful accent as sister and fellow activist Dolores that takes you right out of the movie. Luna also is very much a rookie behind the camera, and it shows in many of the shots and transitions. One of Joe's favorites, John Malkovich, is great as always.
Oh, yeah.
But you'll appreciate this, Joe.
Uh-oh.
They have him in these glasses that make him look exactly like Louis Black, the comedian. And so it's very distracting. Maybe not for everybody.
It's kind of funny.
But it was for me. All in all, Cesar Chavez isn't bad, but certainly is a small film compared to the man himself and all he accomplished. And I give it a B-.
That's a little disappointing to hear.
Yeah, it was. And Michael Pena, I know between the three of us has sort of been a quickly rising face. We loved End of Watch.
He's a likable guy.
We've seen him in a few things recently. He had a great supporting role in American Hustle.
Oh, that's right.
As the Sheik,
yeah.
the fake Sheik. So yeah, I mean, you know, he did a good job, but it was just there wasn't enough there. And like Bateman's Bad Words, which we reviewed a couple of weeks ago, this is Diego Luna's, you know, premiere directorial effort.
A little rough.
And you know, we know him from Elysium and Milk and some other roles, but yeah, behind the camera, not so much yet. I think it was a little bit scattered. So
okay.
All right, well, let's move on to our home media moment, and that is How I Live Now. And Justin's going to tell us about that.
Daisy, played by Saoirse Ronan, is a neurotic teenager who moves to England to live with her cousins. However, just as she begins to adjust to her new surroundings, word breaks out of the start of World War III, and eventually separates their family as Daisy and her youngest cousin Piper, played by Harley Bird, make the perilous journey back to their home. Perhaps the best thing How I Live Now has at its disposal comes from the overall raw nature of the film. While other movies with the general concept this has, like Red Dawn, have flooded with the belief that society would go into hiding and then fight back almost instantly, How I Live Now takes a more honest stance. The protagonists are youths, who do not know any other home than the one they've had, and as such, it only makes sense that they would do their best to try and stay there while the rest of the world erupts in chaos outside their doors. This will likely cause some to dismiss their actions as foolish and dumb. But for children in this kind of situation, it's more than believable, particularly as the consequences start to take hold. The problem with the film, however, comes from the rather cliché character development and relatively rushed pacing. While Daisy's decidedly introverted, which Ronan does a relatively good job with handling, the constant repetitive use of voiceover for her character's paranoid inner babbling tends to get annoying from time to time. Alongside this, How I Live Now focuses solely on her, and with a somewhat rushed hour and 40-minute running time, none of the supporting cast gets relatively developed, which hurts some of these emotional scenes later on. That said, How I Live Now's brutal honesty still partially outshines these noticeable flaws, and I give it a C+. This
is like the episode of Agreement. For me, this was another swing and a miss from the young adult adaptation file. Meg Rosoff's book came out a decade ago and has won several literature prizes, but this version changes a few things that seem to hurt it a little bit. How I Live Now is certainly better than much of the YA fare out there, as we talked about a few weeks ago with the Divergent review, but it's still pretty average. The World War III backdrop is good. Daisy is an okay character. I don't know that she's fleshed out quite enough, but Ronan plays her with ease. But the film doesn't start getting interesting until about halfway through, when Daisy and youngest cousin Piper depart to find Piper's brothers. As such, they're really the only characters we care anything about, and it's also a world somehow not unlike 28 Days Later, where these two seem to be almost the only people left in the country, except for a scant few that they run into, which I didn't think seemed very realistic. Justin mentioned the inner monologue stuff. I also thought the dream sequences were a little bit weird.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, they were a little ridiculous. And much like Justin, I give How I Live Now a C+. Joe, your thoughts?
All right. Slow, but I think that there was some strong atmosphere and it was held together by some decent performances, mostly from young actors, and that in itself I actually found kind of impressive. I love the soundtrack. I thought there were some great songs in this movie.
That is true.
Really did add to it, and I loved that. And I thought the cinematography was wonderful. There was some great editing of the gorgeous countryside. And I thought the characters were maybe a little flat at points, but fairly believable. And that was really the crux of it. In terms of being a post-apocalyptic kind of movie, I thought it was a bit weak. Like I've seen a lot better, and it didn't really... I mean, I guess it was going for realism and something a little more believable the way the world actually would go in that situation, which I gave it props for, but it just didn't feel like that to me. It felt a little bland. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the big thing going against it. It had kind of an interesting twist, but overall I'd say it was just a little underdeveloped, and I also give it a C+.
Wow, no kidding.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like this really could have been something a little bit more... I don't know what exactly it needed other than maybe fleshing out
stuff,
all of the characters and all of the
world.
Yeah, the world and the war and the characters.
Like, I barely noticed there was a war. I mean, they did occasionally come across the bases, but other than people running around in uniforms, I thought it was almost like a vacation and they ran into a base and
right.
Like I didn't really feel like this was World War III.
Did you think it was weird that like no one was around anywhere?
And considering that no one was around, everything looked pretty nice.
Yeah. Considering a war just took place, I felt like this beautiful landscape.
It's like, oh, this great forest and no radiation?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just didn't quite fit.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned the book was a decade old. Did you read it?
I didn't, but I do know a couple things about it. And one of the things is that there's a completely separate cousin that they took out of this movie completely.
Oh, wow.
The two cousins in the film are twins in the book. Mm-hmm. And they made them one older, one younger for the movie, and then completely threw away the other brother.
Go figure.
So I'm not sure what the reasoning for that was. Maybe because they already didn't know how to develop characters in this movie, so they figured, why throw another one in the mix?
Too much.
Because really, I mean, the brothers, as they were just kind of there. I mean, they didn't really... I mean, they granted, they get taken away pretty early in the film.
Mm-hmm.
You know what?
But
I felt like it was kind of a sort of a teenage version of Saving Private Ryan. Like they were kind of just a plot point.
Oh, okay.
To kind of get things moving and sort of explore the world. Mm-hmm. But the characters themselves, we didn't really care too much about them.
No. And I don't want to give anything away, but when some characters are going through some post-traumatic stress disorder, you're just like, okay, well, what'd they go through? Like, maybe tell us a little bit more about anything.
That'd be kind of interesting, but oh, wait.
Right.
We're almost done.
And what you said, I mean, it is only an hour and 40 minutes. They could have, if it was a 2-hour movie, they could have given us a reason to care a little bit more, you know, about the characters.
Definitely.
But no doubt, Ronan did a good job. And we just talked about her last week in Grand Budapest Hotel as a side character, but I'm liking her more and more. She keeps popping up.
She's definitely growing on me. I wasn't crazy about her when I think my first introduction to her was in Atonement. I know she got a lot of praise for that.
Okay, yeah.
But that I just wasn't feeling too much.
But you liked Hannah.
I did. I thought Hannah was a very good movie.
That's the first time I ever saw her, I think.
I know you were definitely of not the same opinion, but...
I think I gave it a C or a C+. It's about the same as this movie, I guess. But again, she was good in it.
Fair point.
It wasn't her fault. I didn't really care for it.
That's true.
But yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see. I know she has a couple new films in the pipeline for later this year and next year, so we'll be seeing more of her. Okay, well, let's move into our top 5. This is a very interesting one this week, based on the movie Seven that Justin brought to us for Old Classic. We've got the top 5 serial killer characters. And I want to sort of stress this before we go into the actual top 5s, is that these are the portrayals of the characters or the characters themselves if they're fictional. You know, because some of these may be real serial killers on our list. We don't want to glorify that, hey, they're great serial killers, but just the portrayals of them or the characters themselves are good. So let's start with Joe on the top 5 serial killers.
All right. Well, I know this is a bit of a controversial choice for the 5 because I guess you could argue whether or not he's technically a serial killer, but if not, I'll ask Justin, and I do have a backup just in case, but I still want to mention him anyway, and that would be Tobin Bell as Jigsaw from the Jigsaw series, because he does technically kill a lot of people in a kind of a pattern, so technically.
First one, yes. Any other ones, no.
All right, well, still kills a lot of people in a rudimentary pattern, but he's just a compelling character, ruthless, intelligent, complex, and commanding. A great actor, too. You know, I think Tobin Bell always manages to bring so much menace to his characters, but I think he was born to play Jigsaw. And a really, really interesting character, and just a great way to start the franchise. And he kind of really caused the spurt of various other ones, too. So
yeah.
Kind of started a weird cult. But since I didn't put him on the list, I do have an honorable mention that would have pretty much been in the same slot as Tobin Bell, and that would be the man who played Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. I mean, that guy just had true creepiness and probably brought the most realism to the role I've seen in. Alright, number 4 would be Robert Englund from the Nightmare on Elm Street series, Freddy Krueger. Frightening, sadistic, and supernatural. He's a domineering presence, but kind of funny in his kind of messed up way. So he has more personality than most slashers of those types of films. And honestly, great villain, very iconic despite his terrible, fashion sense. Number 3, we'll talk about a little bit later, and that's John Doe, played by Kevin Spacey from Seven. This whole movie builds up to him, and when he arrives, he completely steals the movie and gives some of the best monologues in any thriller. Number 2 might make Justin happy. I'm not sure. But that would be Patrick Bateman, Christian Bale, American Psycho. Complex look into the mind of a monster. Both horrifying and funny simultaneously, and I think that's pretty impressive. And honestly, to date, I still think it's some of Bale's best work.
All right, well, Justin, let's go with your top 5.
Well, to kick mine off, much like Joe, I have an honorable mention. Stephen Railsback as Charlie Manson did a fantastic job in the Helter Skelter 1976 TV movie. However, as many a person will tell you, Charlie Manson is not technically a serial killer, so I could not actually, in good conscience, put him on this list. But
he's, for all intents and purposes, a serial killer.
But just a perfect honorable mention.
I could see how he'd be in the same category as Jigsaw.
Yeah, it's like, basically motivated people, got other people to kill people, but never physically did it himself.
But otherwise, here we go. Number 5, David Cronenberg as Dr. Philip K. Decker in Nightbreed. I consider Nightbreed to be honestly one of the most underrated horror films of all time, and I think we think of David Cronenberg as this kind of bizarre, surreal filmmaker.
He is.
Obviously, Videodrome and The Fly and what have you. But in this, it's a complete change of pace, and he completely sells the character. He's crazy, he's psychotic, he's manipulative, and you're always interested in what he may be doing next. My number 4 is, and I apologize if I pronounce this incorrectly, Frank Gierning and Arno Frisch as Peter and Paul in Funny Games. They are unquestionably one of the most unique serial killers I've ever seen on film. They're psychotic and twisted, but they take it a step further by bringing the audience into it, by breaking the fourth wall repeatedly throughout the entire film. They're every bit psychotic killers as they are critiques of media as well. They'll often be in the middle of this like psychotic mind game, and they will literally turn towards the camera and be like, "You're watching this. What do you think of it?" Number 3 is one I think you've seen, Joe. Dan, I'm not so sure. Min-Sik Choi as Hyung Chol in I Saw the Devil.
Oh, yeah. Found that one.
It is quite possibly the most cold-blooded killer on this list. And while a great deal is devoted to his killing in the film, there's an equally big emphasis placed on him in terms of how he's eluding the overall quote-unquote protagonist, who by the end of the film is almost every bit as bad as him, if not worse, bent on getting revenge on him for killing his wife. However, he still has somewhat of a personal life as well that comes into it, and by the finale it really does blur the lines between who can be considered good and who can really be considered evil. And my number 2, a little bit on the more familiar side, and that is Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs. There's truly nothing more terrifying than a brilliant madman, and he's every bit as tactful and manipulative as he is a psychopath. And while his other outings in the franchise haven't quite had the same punch as his first, the books have never stopped bringing out why Hannibal is one of the most formidable fictional serial killers in history.
Very, very interesting choices.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'll give an honorable mention as well, because I was debating which horror villain to put on my number 5. So my honorable mention will go to Ghostface from the Scream franchise.
Okay.
I like a guy that has a little fun with his murders and
he's a fun party guy.
Yeah.
Hello, Sydney.
Hang out with Ghostface at a party.
I feel like
he loves his movies.
Yeah, he loves movies.
He would be good at trivia.
Yeah. So, but my real number 5 is Mrs. Voorhees from the original Friday the 13th.
That's a good one.
Thank you. Played by Betsy Palmer. And I really liked that she mixed it up a little bit with her victims. She had arrows, she had a gun, she had a knife.
She's dynamic.
She's very resourceful.
Just picture this old lady, I got you now, with the bow.
And, so she I don't know, I liked her.
No, she's underrated. She's actually the real villain of the series.
Yes, I think she is very underrated. My number 4 is Norman Bates, played by Anthony Perkins, and of course that's from Psycho. And he was inspired by real-life serial killer Ed Gein, who I learned quite a bit about when I went to the crime museum in Washington, D.C.
They don't have his lampshades, though, do they?
No, they don't have his lampshades, but they talked all about him.
I'm wondering, I feel like if they had at the museum, that'd be kind of morbid.
No, luckily they don't.
He probably would have thrown up or something.
But Norman Bates is definitely pretty psychotic. I mean, obviously we're learning a lot about his supposed background now with the series Bates Motel, which I think is extremely interesting for a character sort of so defined already. But Anthony Perkins, did a great job with him, and he's just a loony character, obviously. Mm-hmm. Number 3 is John Doe, played by Kevin Spacey in Seven. Like Joe mentioned, we will be talking about this a little bit later, but I mean, just what a great sociopath. He does all these really super elaborate deaths. Another very creative serial killer here. And the scene towards the end in the car with Brad Pitt is fantastic. My number 2 is Aileen Wuornos, who is a real-life serial killer, and she's portrayed by Charlize Theron in Monster, in an Academy Award-winning role. Her serial killer nature isn't too dynamic. Guys are trying to rape her. She kills them. Some of them aren't really even doing anything. She kills them. It's all with a gun. It's always sort of the same scenario, but the portrayal of this is just outstanding. Charlize definitely deserved the Oscar. Justin's a huge fan and needs to see this movie.
Surprised you haven't, actually.
Yeah.
I remember everyone talking about it when it came out, so...
Yeah, it's fantastic, and Christina Ricci actually is really good in it, too, as her girlfriend.
And her forehead's never been bigger.
Forehead has never been bigger.
Sorry.
But the makeup crew on this movie, because they ugly her up. I mean, she's a gorgeous woman. We all know that. But Charlize Theron is so hideously ugly. But realistic. Like, they don't make her look like
a monster.
A monster. She just, no pun intended, but they make her look like a real life woman who is a prostitute and down on her luck.
Did you ever actually see the documentary?
I didn't.
Because, she has her down, completely.
I've seen a picture of her, and she looks like her.
She looks exactly like her. She speaks exactly like her. You can tell she really got into this person's mind. And it's probably her best performance, actually, Justin. Personally, I didn't like the movie that much because I found it a little too unpleasant. But,
it's very unpleasant, yeah.
But it is a good one.
Serial killer-wise, she's not that ingenious or anything, but as far as performance,
kind of an interesting story, though.
All right, well, Joe, what's your number 1 on the serial killer portrayal top 5?
My number 1 is Owen Wilson from The Myers Man. No.
You got me again.
No. It's Hannibal Lecter, Anthony Hopkins, Silence of the Lambs. Pretty much everything that Justin said previously for his number 2. Just a great performance. Steals every scene that he's in. He's only in 17 minutes of the movie, but it's just the most memorable, hard-hitting part of the movie. It's the crux of the movie. He plays this creepy but strangely likable character whose charisma just consumes the whole film, and it's just great. There's really nothing else to say. It's as dynamic as you'd expect it to be.
All right, Justin, what's your number 1?
John Amplas as Martin in Martin. This is George A. Romero's one of his other films that was not part of the Dead series, and I think it's, much like Nightbreed, incredibly underrated. For anyone who's unfamiliar, Martin is about this introverted, somewhat disturbed teenager, actually very disturbed teenager, who is under the belief that he is a vampire. But he doesn't have fangs. He can still go out in sunlight, but he has to wear sunglasses because the light hurts his eyes. But when he's out at night, and I think you'll like this part, Dan, he calls into a radio show who's pretty much infatuated with him. And it's one of the more interesting bouts. Martin is every bit a metaphor for addiction as he is a killer, and I think that's really interesting. And what really made him serve as my number 1 is he feels guilty about his overall actions, yet because he believes he's a vampire, he has no control over it. And throughout the film, there is some degree of wondering whether or not he is in fact a vampire, and it still lingers on. And also, as I mentioned with the radio thing, it poses a big question of how would media stations like this handle something like that.
Very cool. That's another one on your list I've not even heard of, Justin. So another one to possibly check out.
Definitely.
Well, my number one is, as well, Hannibal Lecter, portrayed by Anthony Hopkins, of course. What's interesting about The Silence of the Lambs is that it's really... There's two serial killers. You mentioned Buffalo Bill, who's also pretty interesting. I mean, you know, the woman skin suit. I mean, that's, you know, you don't see that too often.
Pretty cool guy, right?
Yeah, he's not bad. But, of course, you know, as we all know, Hannibal Lecter makes that movie what it is. And we've talked about this film at length on a few different top fives, so I don't need to go into too much detail, but I think a good number one.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, well, now we have our triple feature of older films, and we're going to do All About Eve coming up in the Oscar nominee A to Z. Justin brought us Seven, starring Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman, for the old classic. But first up is our new classic, and that is Cabin in the Woods. And Joe's going to tell us about that.
Yes, I am. Cabin in the Woods is a 2012 satirical horror film directed by Drew Goddard and written/produced by Joss Whedon. It stars Chris Hemsworth, Kirsten Connolly, and Anne Hutchinson. The film follows 4 college students, each fitting a respective stereotype of the slasher genre, going out into the woods to take a little vacation in an abandoned cabin. Stop me if you've heard this before. This quickly leads to an assortment of various horror tropes, including bizarre rituals, summoning undead monsters, run-ins with creepy hillbillies, and some obligatory gory deaths. The survivors soon discover that there is more going on than first appears, as the events within the area are being manipulated and monitored by a mysterious organization. This facility seems aware of supernatural horrors across the world and tries to keep the process going in order to hold greater evil forces at bay. This film is an interesting concept and does seem to be a pretty decent homage to horror films, particularly slasher movies. Whedon's usually pop culture-filled humor is littered through the movie, adding charm to some decent characters who overall give relatively decent performances from their actors. The twist itself offers a kind of dark humor and even some potential meat to the overall narrative. Sadly, the biggest issue with Cabin is that it has the elements of something groundbreaking, but kind of falls into a fairly generic trap. With the exception of some genuinely smart humor and a cool setup, the story is really just your basic horror movie. Personally, I felt the film was not as well balanced as it could have been between the humor and horror elements. It did bounce between the two, but not as fluidly as it probably could. Overall, it's good to see for its concept, but not the masterpiece that some people make it out to be, and I give it a B.
Alright, Justin, what did you think of Cabin in the Woods?
The Cabin in the Woods is truly one of those films that has to be admired, if for nothing else than for its fiendish originality. It's a bit difficult to talk about this film without giving spoilers, but needless to say, it takes everything audiences have come to expect from contemporary horror and completely flips it on its head. As such, the film is every bit as funny as it is a wacky, quote-unquote, horror, albeit it's not really that scary, and filled with innumerous memorable lines and scenes. Richard Jenkins and Bradley Whitford are comedy gold, as Joe mentioned, 2 members of the corporation that serve as onlookers, and their banter throughout the film is absolutely priceless. Granted, the finale may seem a bit too dark for the tone The Cabin in the Woods is going for, but overall it's a fun and wildly original movie, well worth a watch, and I give it an A.
Yeah, what Whedon and Goddard did with this movie, and the reason Goddard was on my list a couple weeks ago of the best directorial debuts of the 21st century, is that Cabin is completely different from anything we've seen before. We've seen the horror-comedy hybrid send up with the Scream series, but this actually adds another layer or two. There's mystery, there's some gore, there's hilarious characters, it's got a fantastic story. Like Scream, it pokes fun at the horror genre, while at the same time being a great horror film. Whether or not Justin was scared, the movie is a horror film. Richard Jenkins and Bradley Whitford, as you said, as a couple of the facility workers, are great together. Their back-and-forth chemistry is reminiscent of some of the great comedy duos, even though the two aren't generally known for their comedy acumen. All in all, Cabin is a fun time, and I also give it an A. Justin, you did mention that you thought the end tonally wasn't quite the same as the rest of the film.
Well, I mean, I was okay with it, but I could see how some would consider it a bit too dark with the overall satirical nature of the film.
But see, I think the tone of the film, and I think Joe agrees with me, is that it is a horror comedy film. It's a satirical horror film. So I think there's horror throughout. I mean, is it some of it taken tongue-in-cheek? Certainly. But, I mean, I think there's some genuine thrills and chills in the film.
I'd say there's some scary moments.
I personally liked it, but I can see where a lot of people would say the movie is just completely goes down the deep end. I've actually had a couple conversations with a lot of people over that matter.
Well, I think the movie divides people because people, I think, went into it expecting a straight horror movie.
Or a straight comedy.
Or a straight comedy if they know the background of it.
Joss Whedon.
And, you know, because it's both, I think maybe certain people were unsatisfied with it. I personally was fine with it. I mean, I'm a fan of Whedon's anyway.
I'm surprised you guys aren't kind of asking me about my opinions a little more. I knew the grade would surprise you.
Yeah, Joe, what was your... Were you not satisfied with the comedy horror attack?
For one thing, there was a lot of hype around the movie. It was like best thing ever, which is never a good thing to go into for me.
That's true.
It's like I'm people say literally. I heard a couple people say but most people best thing ever. So I'm expecting.
And critically, it got really great reviews.
Critically, it got great reviews. So
yeah.
I have high standards. People say best thing ever, better be the best thing ever.
Right.
And so I went into it, and I thought it was good, but my biggest problem, ironically, was I didn't find it that funny. And I didn't find it that scary. So
you thought it kind of...
I thought it was kind of flimsy
which
on
is
both
weird
ends.
because the comedy of that movie is... It definitely seems like something that would be in your general vein.
Well, the thing is, the best scenes in the movie were with Bradley Whitford in the facility, and I did like that comedy. But that was the only stuff I liked. The stuff on the other side, I mean, the pothead guy was funny.
Yeah.
That was about it. I thought the characters were underdeveloped, and maybe that was the point, but...
I was going to say.
I don't know. I just felt like it, like I said, had a good hook, but doesn't go into any detail about what's really going on. It's just kind of like a vague background. Then there's the thing at the end.
I'm not sure if I'd agree with that, but...
Yeah, they say...
I think I would.
There's a plot dump.
Probably. I didn't mind that they didn't really explain it,
okay,
but...
like there's the plot dump at the
end. For 90
end.
minutes, they do what they're supposed to do.
But there's a plot dump at the end, and they kind of say more stuff, but there's a lot more they could have done to expand on it and explain what's going on. And then it could have been funnier and would have worked even more as a parody, I think. I'm actually surprised you guys give it A's. Really. It doesn't seem like Justin at all. I'm really surprised by you.
I think I originally gave it an A-, but I actually saw it a second time in theaters a couple weeks later, so knowing what to expect, was it going to hold up? And I thought it did. It was on the lower end of my A's. I think it was number 16 or 17 the year it came out for me. But I don't know. I thought it did very well at both the comedy and the horror.
Well,
for me, and I remember hearing about the hype. I didn't believe it because we live in an age where it's almost impossible to get something that original on screen. More and more started coming to light about it, and then I was like, okay, maybe I should give this a shot. And I saw it and I thought it was really funny. I thought it was a great sort of criticism of the way horror movies are structured now. And I just completely loved it.
I'm just surprised you guys weren't that surprised.
I was a little surprised that I thought maybe A-, B+ range for you.
I was bordering on a B+.
Okay.
And I
couldn't get it there.
Now, I was thinking I could probably try and watch it again. Maybe, and might bump it up to a B+, but it's not in the A range for me.
Was that the first time you had seen it?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
that explains a lot more.
That explains... I thought you had seen it before.
Nope, I knew a lot about it, but
okay.
I had not seen it. I was interested in it, but it just... I don't know. I had a lot of hype, and I was kind of disappointed.
Okay. Most of these I know whether you've seen or not, but I for some reason I thought you'd seen that one.
It would
Same,
be,
actually.
It would be one you'd expect that I've seen, but
right.
I've never seen it before.
And, as we know, Whedon fan.
But believe it or not, I'm not that much of a horror fan, especially slashers.
Okay.
So maybe I didn't appreciate it as much.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. All right, well, up next is our old classic, and Justin brought this one to us, and that is Seven.
After a mysterious killer emerges using the 7 deadly sins, such as pride, gluttony, greed, etc., as a modus operandi, seasoned and soon-to-be retired detective Somerset, played by Morgan Freeman, and newly transferred rookie detective Mills, played by Brad Pitt, are assigned to investigate. However, as more victims start to come to light, it becomes a race against time to stop the murderer from completing all 7 deadly sins. I chose to run this after several months of being prodded to rewatch the film for my fellow reviewers. Originally, I'd seen 7 on TV, obviously cut more than a couple places, when I was younger, and while I thought it was a decent film, I was rather unimpressed. 7 seemed like the perfect choice for this month. David Fincher truly stands out as one of my favorite contemporary directors, and his talent for telling a narrative is truly well evident here as well. The mystery is suspenseful, yet knows how to take its time, but continuously keeping the audience, and the detectives for that matter, on their toes. This is paired equally with great writing that delivers the dramatic beats at a steady pace, particularly between the 2 leads. However, this is unfortunately where 7 hits a minor slump. While Morgan Freeman as Somerset is particularly spot on, Pitt just is not quite as good as his hot-headed partner. The dialogue for the role is handled fine, but just continues to show that Pitt still had quite a bit to learn about acting during the 90s. That said, 7 is still a well-constructed psychological thriller that I am very glad I chose to give a second watch, and I give it a B+.
Well, I'm glad you watched it a second time and put your grade a little bit higher. I think David Fincher's 7 is easily one of the most entertaining thrillers of the past 20 years. Pitt and Freeman are great together. Both of them, I think, are great. Now, I will admit, obviously, Pitt was a younger actor. You're going up against Morgan Freeman. I thought he held his own pretty well, actually. Probably not as good as Morgan Freeman, but...
Who could be?
Who could be? I mean, it's kind of like, to bring Meet the Parents up again, it's kind of like Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro. I like Ben Stiller, but he ain't no Robert De Niro. But they're good together.
Yeah.
You know, and he holds his own. Anyway, as we heard in the Top 5 segment this week, the movie also introduces us to one of the greatest serial killers ever committed to film. Kevin Spacey does such a great job at playing psychopathic here. The concept is great, and though sometimes a bit too grotesque, but that is the point, isn't it? The eye-catching opening credits sequence really sets the mood for the entire film, much like Fincher's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo did a couple of years ago. I don't really have anything negative to say about 7. If you've never seen it, even if you're a little squeamish like I am, you really need to check it out. It's an A+. Joe?
Well, when it comes to 7, I think it's just one of the greatest thrillers ever made. I mean, it's one of my favorite movies from the 90s. And I think that has to do a lot with Fincher's directing, as well as this really, really consistent tone. It's really gritty. It's in your face, but it's kind of subtle at the same time. It's really interwoven, just very well. And I love the twist. I love the mystery. I think the 7 Deadly Sins is a great twist, and the villain. I mean, Kevin Spacey just gives a great performance here. As I said before, a really commanding presence, and he just completely takes over the movie in the final act. But the whole build-up to him is really worth it, and I think that the crux of the movie is the strength of the chemistry between the 2 leads. I mean, you could argue it's more Morgan Freeman's story, and his character does go through a really good arc, just kind of overcoming his narrow tunnel vision of becoming a jaded cop, seeing all this horrible stuff in the city, but kind of actually coming out of that and seeing why he became an investigator in the first place. I mean, it's a really great story arc for him, and just kind of in contrast with Pitt being the young up-and-comer. He's a bit snotty, he's a bit hot-headed, but you can see that he's genuinely a good person. He wants to do right and well, as well, just in his own way, and they bounce off each other really well as kind of the protege and the old mentor, but also kind of partners and eventually friends. And also Gwyneth Paltrow, an early performance for her,
but not bad for her.
Definitely worth mentioning. She's good here as well. And, you know, it's just a true pillar of the thriller genre for me, and I love my psychological thrillers. It's one of Freeman's best. It's very well shot, well paced, great music and cinematography, great costuming. It's one of my favorite movies, and it gets an A+.
Yeah, it's everything about it is so good. The concept of the 7 Deadly Sins.
Very unique.
It's unique. It adds such a good twist to it. Now, Justin, I don't think you mentioned Kevin Spacey, and he wasn't on your top 5. Did you think he did a good job as John Doe?
Yeah, I thought he did a relatively good job. My main issue with him, and it's just one thing that kind of bothers me with a lot of mysteries, is when they don't really give you any time to piece together who it might be, and then they just throw somebody out in the open as like, it's this guy.
It's not really like there's possible suspects. They're trying to track this one guy down.
But you can still have suspects. It's a mystery.
You could, but that's just not the direction they chose to go with it.
I don't know if it is necessarily a mystery, at least who it is. I think the mystery is more why they're doing it rather than who it is.
And catching them.
Yeah.
Because they know that there is one serial killer, and like I said, you're right, sometimes there are mysteries where there are multiple suspects, but not every time. I think psychological thriller would be a more accurate description of them.
Yeah, it's true.
Insight
But there
into
still
the
is
killer's mind.
there still is some degree of mystery to it.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
But again, I think the mystery is
Why?
figuring out why. And so I don't think it's a problem that they sort of... I mean, I agree with you that they glossed over that part of it, but I don't think it was necessary to the story.
You could argue that it's also focusing on the two characters and their journey, you know, and that's really the center of the film.
And the kind of contrast between them. I mean,
What-
they both have sort of a glass half empty philosophy, but Pitt's is somewhat not as jaded, I believe you mentioned. Was the
he's
choice word?
still a bit fresh and hopeful in a way.
Yeah. And I mean, I like that, but it was like...
People are good, man.
But that was like something that Pitt just at the time could not emphasize it enough at his current acting status.
All right,
I
you know
was
what?
sort of... I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right, before you continue,
Go on.
in your review,
Yes.
you state
Yep.
that Pitt's acting, he was still learning how to act, but
Yes.
you also said that the performances were good from the two leads. I'm going to use your sentence
It's
there.
good. And
Would you say that Pitt could hold his own as a lead in a film? Because
in this one, not as much. I mean, like I've always been mentioning since season 1, I think Pitt is so much better as a supporting guy. I know a lot of people liked him in World War Z. I think they are mistaken. But with 7, I think he does okay. Obviously, he's with Fincher, so Fincher usually gets a good performance out of everyone that's in his movies.
What about Fight Club?
Uh,
You like Fight Club.
I don't consider him a leading man in that movie.
he technically is. Well,
I won't argue
Well,
that.
just when you were watching the movie, you didn't seem to understand how his character was being played. You asked about his age, and
That's because I wanted to give him a fair shake. I mean, obviously, his character is much younger, but I was trying to think, okay, how young is young?
because I thought he portrayed the young, kind of rather ignorant cop pretty well, cocky,
Yeah.
pretty
Good rookie.
good rookie cop. I mean, I thought he did a good job with that, and I think you would agree, right?
I thought it was good. I didn't think it was necessarily standout. I mean,
Would you say that he held his own as a lead performer? You're still kind of dodging this question.
Not particularly, to be honest with you.
Okay, all right, whatever. Dan, anything to add?
Well, I mean,
I agree it's not his best performance ever, but,
no, but for this early in his career, I would say it probably is.
yeah.
I mean, this and Fight Club, I guess, they came out relatively, within a couple of years of each other.
If it makes you feel any better, Justin, I do agree that he does do better as a side character, but I still think he's a good lead man when he needs to be.
If it came down to the David Fincher top 5, this one would rank number 1,
For pretty much every
2, and 3 for me. I mean, it's so good, and I know you prefer Dragon Tattoo to me. I didn't like it quite as much as you did. So we're sort of flip-flopped on that, but I mean, I think Fincher really got great performances out of both of them, and obviously Kevin Spacey. And just, Joe mentioned the cinematography and the score, and I mean, just the whole atmosphere of this movie sucks you right in. I mean, for my money, this is probably the best thriller, at least in the last 20 years, possibly in my lifetime. I mean, I can't think of too many.
It's
it's
up there, I'd say.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, last week, we talked about Alien. I gave that an A+ as well. I don't think that's necessarily a thriller, but it does have...
It's thrilling.
Yeah, it's thrilling. That's a little more of a hybrid that we talked about. But, God, what a good movie. This will make you feel better, I'm sure, Justin. But other than Pinocchio, which I ran, this is my favorite old classic that anybody has run.
There you go.
It's a fantastic movie.
No, I mean, I'm not denying that it's a good movie. It is.
And I'm glad you finally got to watch it with the scenes intact that...
Yes, you gave
Oh my
it
gosh.
a more fair grade. Your B- was unacceptable.
Well, when we were watching it, we would say things like, Justin, I know you didn't see this on TV.
I don't remember this part at all.
This never happened.
You mean like this whole 5-minute scene?
Right, like, there's
so much stuff you can't show.
There's a rather large handful, probably, of movies that if you've never seen before, you don't want to watch on broadcast TV for the first time. HBO, sure, that's uncut.
Right.
But, I mean, if you had seen Seven before and then seen it on TV, I could say, all right, at least you'll know what's happening. But, I think that was a real disservice to you to see it that way. So I'm glad you rewatched it.
Thank you.
All right, and our final film is one of the biggest ever that we'll be talking about for the Oscar A to Z. It's All About Eve from 1950. It set a record for 14 Oscar nominations, which has never been beaten, and it's only been matched one other time. That was Titanic. And it won 6 of the awards, including 5. It got 5 acting nominations, 2 for each actress and supporting actress. George Sanders won for supporting actor, and it also won picture, director, and screenplay. And it's still the only film in history to receive 4 female acting nominations. So, huge pedigree for this movie. High expectations. Let's see if it delivered. In All About Eve, Bette Davis plays Margot Channing, a Broadway star at her peak, but has just turned 40, and newcomer Eve Harrington, played by Anne Baxter, is an up-and-comer who befriends Margot and inserts herself into her life, calling into question the future of Margot's career and personal life. All About Eve, as we've said, is one of the most highly regarded films of all time, but how well does it hold up in 2014? It's definitely good, don't get me wrong, but at 2 hours and 20 minutes, it definitely drags at times, and all of the theater chatter and puns and references get very old. But Davis is absolutely an actress of the highest regard, and this is her masterclass. Baxter is solid as Eve, and my favorite, Thelma Ritter as Bertie the maid, who sees all and speaks her mind about it, is also great here. The men are all decent, but nothing to write home about. There are plenty of interesting themes explored in All About Eve, including that of women's roles in society, the cost of aging in a youthful business, Broadway versus Hollywood. I personally didn't find it quite as engaging as its legend would have me believe, but its cultural impact cannot be ignored, with TV shows as varied as Mary Tyler Moore, Glee, and Gilligan's Island all paying homage to the film. So for that, I will bump up my personal grade for the film and give All About Eve an A-. I thought it was probably more of a B. Joe, what'd you think?
All right. I kind of admire what this film is saying, and I especially for the time it came out, I think it definitely did push some boundaries, particularly in its dialogue. And I thought the acting, particularly from Davis, I thought she was
so good.
She was stellar, and I did like the maid. That was a well-written character. A lot of funny lines. I did like the theater puns and some of the themes that are going through to use that as an exploration. But I do agree the puns and stuff got kind of tiresome and a bit pretentious after a while. That critic guy, I just hated him by the end of the movie.
It was the only thing he could talk about.
Don't you have anything else to your character? I don't know. He just annoyed me. I thought the movie had a tendency to be a little overdramatic, but then again, since they're all theater players, maybe that goes without saying. Really, it just brought an interesting introspective look into these things, but I don't know. For me, I gave it the benefit of doubt, and my personal grade for it would have been a B. Maybe it deserves a little higher for that, for its cultural impact, but I think it's a good movie. It's worth seeing, but it's too long. It is too long, and that's the biggest gripe against it, but I still did like the acting, and I liked the story, and I liked some of the dialogue and themes, but it's probably still worth
So you leave it with a B.
I'd say a B is how I felt about it.
When you hear that, this tied Titanic for the most nominations of any movie in the history of cinema.
You're expecting something.
I, like you, was expecting to be, blown away. And we've seen a lot of Oscar nominees, even pretty recently, that I thought were either a little bit better done, maybe not better acted. I can get behind that. Bette Davis, as we know, is great. And there's an early Marilyn Monroe appearance in the film as well.
I actually liked that.
Little cameo.
I thought I recognized her, and then we saw the credits. Like, oh, that girl.
Here she is.
She looked a lot like that girl that played Marilyn in that movie you guys showed me. Oh, it was actually Marilyn Monroe when she was young. Okay.
Yeah, it's her first really big role.
Great casting
big movie
for her too in that film, because the girl they got to play her looked exactly like Marilyn Monroe.
In My Week with Marilyn.
In My Week with Marilyn.
Yes, Michelle Williams.
Michelle Williams.
She really did a spot on Monroe.
Great movie, by the way, and it just got me like...
Yeah, side note, because we haven't talked about this movie on the show.
We
watched it before we were doing the podcast, but My Week with Marilyn is a very good movie.
I think I gave it like an A.
Yeah, I think it was a B+ for me. It's very good.
I liked it a lot.
Well, Justin, let's hear from you about All About Eve.
If there's one element of film history that often gets overlooked, as Dan mentioned, it would probably be the idea of Broadway theater and the conflict with Hollywood as a whole. This serves as much of the basis of All About Eve, and dealing with this changing lifestyle as the characters deal with many of their friends setting off for Hollywood in pursuit of new careers. As such, the characters themselves, notably Davis in the lead, are unhappy and infrequently monologue about their woes. It may not make them the most likable characters, they aren't. Unfortunately, All About Eve, as Joe mentioned, does run a bit on the long side, but despite this flaw, All About Eve is a well-written and potentially ahead of its time film that's well-deserving of the acting nominations it's acquired, and much like Dan, I'm going to bump up my personal grade for this, which would have been a B+ to an A-.
How about all the nominations, Justin? I agree that the acting nominations are all deserved. Director, probably. But I mean, this thing is one of the the biggest Academy darlings of all time.
Mm-hmm. It's good. It's a very good movie. It's just it also does have its setbacks.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I pointed this out to Justin earlier, but it strikes me that the people that make up the Academy are all
old
actors, directors, old white people. People who are in the industry.
Yeah.
So what movie came out in 1950 that they were all hardcore in love with, but a movie where they actually saw themselves on the screen?
It's a kind of a movie about acting and writing and...
Though to play devil's advocate for a moment, they're focusing on theater actors, which is a big difference from film actors.
I can appreciate that point. But it's still actors voting for a movie about actors.
That's true.
And I think certainly, like Joe mentioned, it's an older demographic that makes up the Academy as well. And half of the plight of this movie is Margot is turning 40 and oh no, what's going to happen to my roles, my fan base, this, that, and the other thing. And I think that they could probably relate to that as well.
I think he's saying it's a little pandering.
I think so. For that to get all these nominations, I mean, we've seen, what was the one? Adam's Rib. I really liked that one. I thought that was well done. We've all seen many of these Oscar nominees that I think we can agree maybe at least hold up better than All About Eve.
It's all about Cellini.
Your favorite, The Affairs of Cellini.
Hilarious.
Yep.
Good times.
Seek it out on YouTube because it's not on DVD.
Watch it for free.
That's for sure.
Please do.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week.
And I do want to end on a note here. Actually, I'm thinking about it, and I'm going to officially say it. I think Cabin in the Woods does deserve B+. I don't really have any major problems with the movie. I really don't. I'm like, I do feel like B doesn't quite give it a service. I think B+ is I'll go back to my original grade for it, I think.
Okay.
Well, if we're on the bumping note, I'm going to change 7 to an A-.
All right.
Wow.
All right. I can live with that.
Okay.
What changed your mind?
I kept thinking about all my thoughts on it, and I just kept thinking, like, okay, yes, I wasn't as satisfied with Pitt as much as I was with Morgan Freeman and the overall storyline. And that's really... That's still a legitimate grade for me. I know you guys aren't necessarily in agreement with me on that. That's a little too punishing for a B+.
Okay. Well, I'm good with the A-. That's good.
Well, in the spirit of all this, I'll go on the record and say I think Rio 2 definitely deserves the C+ I gave it. That we all gave it. and I don't think that needs to change. No, I do actually change my grades probably more frequently than either of you two gentlemen. Upon reflection, once the show is in the can,
which isn't a bad thing.
Which, sometimes a little reflection is what we need. But I think I'm happy with my grades for this week at least.
Yeah.
But we'll see. But yeah, thanks for listening, and we are on Film Fanatics with an exclamation point on Facebook. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not done so already. And you can check out our 5-word reviews weekly on the Facebook, of course. And the Twitter feed is @FilmFanaticsPod. And we'll see you back here next week. Bye!